Welcome back into the S&S Show, Touchdown Alabama Magazine's premier football show. Scott Hodnett and I just giving a little recap on the Alabama-West Virginia game. It's Tide winning that matchup 33-23. But there were some other matchups going around the realm of college football, and everybody pretty much got tested. In week one, it was not just Alabama. You had Ohio State get tested by Navy, LSU get tested by Wisconsin, and even Florida State got tested by Oklahoma State. But let's talk about this Florida State-Oklahoma State matchup here, Scott. You look at Jameis Winston fresh off the Heisman Trophy, Jimbo Fisher and company fresh off a national championship, and you're playing against an Oklahoma State team that is a tough football team. Mike Gundy's a good coach. Oklahoma State's not only a tough Big 12 opponent, but they're a tough team as a whole in college football. And I know a lot of people talk about Trevor Knight, and he's a good quarterback. A lot of people talk about Bryce Petty, and he's pretty good himself. But J.W. Walsh is a very athletic quarterback. He's a precise passer, but he's very deceptive with his feet. What did you see out of Oklahoma State that impressed you, and what did you see out of Florida State that they might need to work on?
Oh yeah, the Florida State-Oklahoma State game was really interesting. I picked it last week. I thought Florida State would handle Oklahoma State really easily, and Oklahoma State came to play. They played them tough the entire game. The game was in doubt with only a few minutes to go in the fourth quarter when J.W. Walsh fumbled. Unfortunately, it was a great defensive play by Florida State, and they forced the fumble. But up to that, Oklahoma State was playing Florida State blow for blow. It was a heavyweight matchup the whole game pretty much. It was a great game. I believe Florida State needs to work on a lot of their offensive line stuff. They're as veteran as an offensive line as you can get in college football these days. I believe all five of them are seniors, which is unbelievable. It really. And Oklahoma State took them. I mean, they whooped them up front most of the game. They and that's not the biggest Oklahoma State defensive front four, and they whooped them all game pretty much. I mean, yeah, they got their points, and Jameis made some plays here and there, especially that run that he made, which is a Heisman caliber run. It was great, but Oklahoma State looked really good defensively, even though they gave up 37 points to me. And Oklahoma State's offense looked good too. They're going to tear through the Big 12, and I think Oklahoma and Oklahoma State's it's going to be interesting in the Big 12 this year too. But yeah, I came away really impressed with Oklahoma State even in the loss.
That Bedlam game between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State starting to look kind of interesting, even though it's later on in the season. We talked about Todd Gurley being in love with the end zone, and it's true. The young man, 300 all-purpose yards, 4 touchdowns. 4 touchdowns against Clemson in a game in which Clemson and Georgia were tied at halftime. And people were wondering, why is this game tied? The coaching staff found out it's tied because we're not getting Todd Gurley the ball. And when they got Todd Gurley the ball, the game broke open. Todd Gurley feasted on Clemson's defense, but you could see the energy of Todd Gurley. You can see the charisma of Gurley. He wasn't just scoring. He was being energetic. He was in the offensive line huddle, in the quarterback huddle, in the defense huddle, keeping everybody engaged. How special is this young man? And if Georgia can keep Gurley healthy, how special can Georgia's season be? And more importantly, how special can a Heisman become for Todd Gurley?
Todd Gurley could be the best player in college football, I think. He can. When you say it, a person can take it to the house anytime he touches the ball, it's sometimes over-exaggerated. It is never over-exaggerated when it comes to Todd Gurley. He is the home run hitter of home run hitters. He is
you're telling me Todd Gurley is the David Ortiz of college football?
Yes. Anytime he touches the ball, which is a lot in the game, especially with the kickoff returns, is a dangerous thing for the defenses. Todd Gurley is awesome. Right now, I would give him the Heisman. I know it's after one game. I mean, he had to battle with Kenny Hill, but Todd Gurley is a man's man, and he is going to run all over that SEC East this year. And Georgia looks like the team to beat now, especially because South Carolina laid the egg the other day. But I know it's week 1. You jump to too many conclusions too fast. But a conclusion I think we can jump to is Todd Gurley is incredible, pretty much.
Mark Richt, his head coach, said, I think he's the best player in college football.
Now, I can't deny it.
I honestly think that Todd Gurley is. Well, you mentioned South Carolina. Yes, removed from Jadeveon Clowney, Kelsey Quarles, Jimmy LeGree, Victor Hampton, all those players, one would think that Spurrier would have the guys coached up and ready to play. Kevin Sumlin had his boys coached up and ready to play. Kenny Hill, people felt like it was Kyle Allen's time to shine to replace the folktale Johnny Manziel. Kevin Sumlin goes with Kenny Hill, and the young man put on a fireworks show. 511 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, was not sacked. It was just a offensive display. Speedy Noyle had a good game. The Trey conundrum, Trey Carson, Trey Williams, both played well. Malcolm Kennedy stepped up big, but Kenny Hill, how much of a recruiter is Kevin Sumlin?
Kevin Sumlin he's a top 5 coach in college football, easily, I think. He is creating an absolute monster that everybody in the SEC, everybody in the SEC West and everybody in the SEC as a whole should be very, very aware of. Kenny Hill, it was one of the best performances offensively I've ever seen in week 1, probably. It was like he was a 5th-year senior. And it was a sight to behold. He could do no wrong at all. Ricky Seals-Jones had a great game. The size that they have offensively is incredible. Their offensive line destroyed South Carolina the whole game, and it was unbelievable. Kenny Hill, and I'm one of the guys that thought Kyle Allen might get the nod. But Kenny Hill proved me wrong.
I thought the same thing, Scott. I mean, a lot of people talked about Kyle Allen as #1 recruit of Scottsdale, Arizona, and I was giving Kyle Allen a shot. But after watching the fluidness of Kenny Hill and the way he played, I'm thinking, look out, SEC. Like Kenny Hill, that was a big-time football game and a big-time performance. And not just that, Scott. The way Kevin Sumlin entered that locker room to congratulate his players. Kevin Sumlin steps in front of his 300-pound defensive lineman and just starts screaming. And the defensive lineman, all he can do is smile, and the guys hopping around Coach Sumlin, getting the water poured on him. How fun is it to play for this man? Kevin Sumlin's a player's coach. When you walk into that locker room, you got to feel good that you're playing for Kevin Sumlin, because he knows how to make these players smile.
He does. I love Kevin Sumlin personally. I hate when Alabama has to play him, but other than that, I love watching him coach. I think he's awesome. Getting to see him in person at media days, I gained even more respect for the dude. I just love the guy. I think he's definitely one of my favorite coaches in football right now. It's got to be a blast to play for him. The style he plays, the way he coaches, everything about it. With Texas at his disposal now, it's scary to think about for the next few years to come, unless he takes an NFL job, which those guys are going to come calling very soon, probably.
And before those guys come calling, A&M is going to get every ounce of Kevin Sumlin that they can. Switching from Kevin Sumlin to the Mad Hatter, Les Miles. LSU took the field Saturday against the Wisconsin Badgers in a game that I personally said was going to be an evenly matched game. You have 2 teams that love to run the football, that are defensively stable, but offensively questions at the quarterback position. And for three quarters of the game, I was right. The quarterback struggled to get going. People have to understand Tanner McAvoy, Wisconsin's quarterback, was a converted safety. They did not have a lot of confidence in Joe Stavi, and Wisconsin does not have those vertical threats at receiver. But the Badgers went up 24-7 on LSU, and for a moment there, I'm thinking, oh man, this is a big-time upset, big-time game for Wisconsin. Boy, was I wrong, because Anthony Jennings, Trevon Duro, and that team, led by, of course, running back Kenny Hilliard, put on a show in the second half. LSU came all the way back to win 28-24. It was a tale of two halves. How big was LSU's defense in that second half, Scott? Because in the first half, Melvin Gordon was running free. And that second half was LSU's defense under John Chavis tightened up, and offensively, they were able to get plays going.
Well, John Chavis did his John Chavis adjustments at halftime, quite obviously. That was definitely a game of tale of two halves, and Wisconsin really had one slip. They had that game, and they let it slip away. It could have been a statement game for the entire Big Ten. But LSU did what LSU does, man. They don't quit. They just kept clawing back, and when they got that long touchdown to Trevon Durrell, and then got the 2-point conversion, you knew they were going to win the game. It just because I think it was 21-13, and when they got those 8 points to make it it was 24-13, and then they made it 24-21. You knew they were going to win the game. Wisconsin couldn't do anything offensively in the second half. LSU just made the best adjustments they could, and their offense looked great in the second half too. Everybody came to play except my boy Fournette, man. He got a little bit he didn't have a great game.
I was trying to see where was he. I saw so much of Kenny Hilliard. I was looking for Leonard Fournette, and I saw him a couple of times on special teams, but not too much.
He had 9 rushes for 10 yards, so not great. He did not have a great debut, but he'll get it. He's too good not to.
Before we get into the preview of Alabama-Florida State and Alabama-Florida Atlantic, and run through some of these picks, I got to talk about two games. Navy and Ohio State, first of all. Navy played it close, but JT Barrett, you're coming in for Braxton Miller. When he really starts to come to his own, and with the schedule that Ohio State has, the very porous schedule that it is, Ohio State still has a slight chance of getting into that college football playoff because the schedule is doable, and JT Barrett, he's only going to get better as time progresses. So is it eerie to say that Braxton Miller's injury was a silver lining? Or can we say that JT Barrett is only going to get better and give the Buckeyes a shot at the college football playoff?
I don't think the question really lies with JT Barrett. He had a good game against Navy. It's the Ohio State offensive line that has to play better. And even if Braxton Miller was in there, I think there are 3 new starters on the offensive line. They're a very young unit, and Navy whipped them up front a lot in that game. It was a very interesting game, and really only until the fourth quarter when Ohio State completely pulled away just because of the depth. Navy couldn't hang with them. Ohio State had too many horses, and I kind of saw it coming. But Navy played a great game. You got to give them props. They ran all over Ohio State. It's what Navy does is run the triple option. They're going to get their their rushing yards. So that's a little skewed probably. But I think Ohio State can definitely make it to the playoff because, I mean, the Big Ten is not that deep, man. I mean, they still have to play Wisconsin, Michigan State. They got to play Michigan, who I think nobody's really talking about Michigan. They had a really good game. Yeah, they played Appalachian State, but they looked great. It was very Doug Nussmeier looking. You saw him run a lot of play option. You could tell it was Doug Nussmeier leading the Wolverines, and I think they're going to beat Notre Dame Saturday. And so, I mean, the Big Ten is not great, but any one team from the Big Ten, I think they can definitely make it if they go undefeated. If you can't get a 1 or 2 loss, it's going to be really tough for a 1 or 2 loss Big Ten champion to make it to the playoff, I think, unless they're just winning when they should. You know what I'm saying? Like, they can't have any bad losses. If they, I mean, Ohio State can easily make it, I think. 'Cause, I mean, Big Ten's the Big Ten, you know?
Big Ten is definitely the Big Ten. Well, before we get to this break, I got to talk about Ole Miss and Boise State. For Boise State to have hung around in that game for 3 quarters, it was 7-6 with 5 minutes to go in the third quarter. Bo Wallace had 3 interceptions. Yes, he made up for it with 3 touchdowns, but as a senior and as one of the more experienced passers in the SEC, Bo Wallace has to get that cleaned up. Yes, Ole Miss won the game, but if he continues to play like he played against Boise State, it's going to be another Ole Miss should have done this. Ole Miss could have done this, and Ole Miss didn't do it because they came up short. How will Bo Wallace be able to clean up his ball placement mistakes?
Bo Wallace is a classic Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. You don't know who you're going to get. And in the Boise State game, you got them both. So Bo Wallace has so much talent. He has a great arm. He just makes too many bad decisions, man. He tries to put balls where he should not put them way too much to have as much experience as he does. And it's to the point where you just don't know if he'll ever get that fixed. This is the most talented Ole Miss team ever probably right now. So the sky's the limit for them. They play in the SEC West, which is very tough, obviously. But the SEC West is up for grabs, and they're right in the thick of things. If Bo Wallace can play as good as Bo Wallace at his height can play, then Ole Miss can win the West. But if Bo Wallace, he can't throw 3 picks against Alabama and expect to win the game. He can do it against Boise State because they're outmatched, talent-wise and depth-wise. He can't do it against Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, LSU. You just can't do it and expect to win.
You have to play fundamentally sound football to win at those programs. But we're going to take another quick break here on the S&S Show, brought to you by Touchdown Alabama Magazine. When we come back, we preview Alabama, Florida Atlantic, the home opener here at Bryant-Denny Stadium this Saturday. And also, more predictions. Was Scott Hodnett undefeated last week? Tune in. As we come back from the break, you're listening to the S&S Show. Welcome back live into the show. Scott Hodnett and I are running through some of the highs and lows of Week 1 in college football, from Todd Gurley totaling 4 touchdowns to Bo Wallace having 3 interceptions, but coming back with 3 touchdowns to help Ole Miss defeat Boise State. But now it's time to preview Alabama, Florida Atlantic. These next 2 games for the tie between Florida Atlantic and Southern Miss are the tune-up games for Alabama to prepare for when Will Muschamp, Kurt Roper, Jeff Driscoll, and the Gators come to town later on in the schedule. As you look at Alabama and Florida Atlantic, Scott, what are some things that Alabama is going to look to try to adjust, clean up, perfect, and basically make better as they continue on with the schedule?
I mean, let's face it. Florida Atlantic and Southern Miss, they're 2 of the bottom 10 teams in Division I football right now. They're both bad. They're going to be easy wins for Alabama, but that doesn't mean Alabama can't try a lot of things and do some adjustments from last week, even if the competition isn't up to par. Florida Atlantic gave up 779 yards of offense against Nebraska last week, almost 500 rushing yards. So Alabama knows that they can run the ball at will, and they're going to do it. And you're going to see a lot of young faces all over the field for Alabama this week. So we know they can run the ball. I think you're going to try to see Blake Sims pass the ball more, deep threats a little bit more, push it down the field, get him a little more comfortable on a defense that we can do it with. I like the coaching call of not bringing Coker in earlier in that game. A lot of fans were crying for it. I don't understand why Blake Sims was getting dogged out so much Saturday. If you take Blake Sims out in a game like that, he loses his rhythm, loses some confidence. What if Coker doesn't get it going? The game was in doubt in the second half still, let's face it. So, great decision leaving Sims in. The next 2 weeks, you're going to see a lot of Coker, both games. You could see Coker half of both games even. It could be 1 quarter, 2 quarter. You never know how many quarters both of the quarterbacks are going to play, but they're both going to get a lot of playing time in prep and to get ready for Florida. But I think you're going to see a lot of defensive adjustments too. You're going to get to see Trey DePriest and Eddie Jackson play their first games this week, which is going to be big. You're going to see DePriest lead the team, get a lot of younger linebackers in there, get some playing time. See how Eddie Jackson plays. His comeback's been great. I can't believe he's ready for week 2. It's awesome. You're going to see secondary play well against an overmatched team. I really think you're really going to see Alabama do whatever they want to, and it's kind of like a scrimmage probably the next couple of games, which is great and what Alabama needed after a tougher than warranted first game. But it is what it is. We got past it, and there you go. And I think Alabama has a couple tune-up games before they get ready for Florida, who is a really good defense. We've heard, even though Florida they didn't get a chance to play Idaho, I think that Florida defense is going to be really good.
Couple of tune-up games before the Crimson Tide take on Florida. Do you see special teams playing a huge part when Alabama takes on Southern Miss and Florida Atlantic? Do you see a lot of field goals from Adam Griffith, a lot of punts from J.K. Scott? Or do you see just the offense in a cohesive flow and not much special teams?
I really think it'll be the offense will be in a flow pretty much the whole games for both of them. I mean, the second half you'll probably see a few more punts and maybe a couple a couple of field goals, but I really don't see Florida Atlantic stopping Alabama very much. I mean, they almost 800 yards against Nebraska. That's really bad, man. I mean, it's going to be a cakewalk probably. I mean, if it's not, then we got something wrong probably. But I mean, J.K. only punted twice against West Virginia, so I mean I like us to do whatever we want to do pretty much, and you'll see some punts and some field goals, probably a couple of them, yeah.
Speaking of cakewalks, I can go for some cake right now. I am pretty hungry, but you know what? I'm gonna get off my food soap opera. So we're gonna get into the picks right now. This is what this show is about. This show is about the picks, and fortunately for me, my record, I'm at 17-3 right now. I got the Colorado State game wrong. I got the Wisconsin LSU game wrong, and I'm quite certain that I got one more game wrong in there. I can't see which one it is off the top of my head, but I'm 17-3 right now. So I'm pretty sure Jordan, yourself, and Brandon are killing me. But I'm over 500. I have a winning record, so I'm happy with that. But let's get into this week's picks as Scott Hodnett once again has laid out the spread there. So, Scott, you will go ahead and go first.
All right, man. Well, this week is a pretty light week in the SEC, as we all know. It's an off week. There's not really any really major games in the SEC, but I'll run down the line a little bit. I like Alabama to easily handle Florida Atlantic. I got Alabama 52, Florida Atlantic 7. I just think it's going to be bad probably. And I like Alabama to try a lot of new things on offense and see Jacob Coker and see what he's like. So I like Alabama 52-7. Auburn plays San Jose State. I like Auburn 45, San Jose State 14. We haven't really talked much about Auburn today, and I think they look good. Their passing threat's going to be a big deal. They got a lot of weapons that are just going to be a big deal in the passing game, and their defense tightened up in that second half and really stifled Arkansas when it was 21-21 at the half. I like Auburn 45, San Jose State 14. Mississippi State plays my alma mater, UAB, right now. UAB looked great against Troy on Saturday. They laid the wood to them. I think it was 48-10. But they're going to be overmatched against Mississippi State. I like Mississippi State 42-17. You got Tennessee, who we haven't talked about either, looked great against Utah State. Tennessee, that's the best I've seen Tennessee play in years. They look like they could contend for the East and upset a few people this year. So I like Tennessee 38 over Arkansas State with 10. LSU has an easy FCS opponent, and Sam Houston State. I mean, they're good in FCS, but they're not going to play LSU very tough. I got LSU 49, Sam Houston State 10. Texas A&M has a bad FCS, Lamar. Texas A&M 59, Lamar 17. South Carolina has got to bounce back. They played the worst out of any big game this week. They look lost on defense the entire game against Texas A&M, which A&M will do that to you a lot, I know. but their offense didn't look great either. So they look like they need to get bounce back and get on the same page, or it's going to be a long season for Spurrier and the Gamecocks. So I got South Carolina 38, East Carolina 17. Kentucky, they look good on Saturday, man. I know they were playing Tennessee Martin, but Kentucky usually don't look that good against even the lesser foes. So like Kentucky 35, Ohio 14. That game could be closer than that, though. Ohio's a pretty good football team, so look for that game to be maybe a little closer than that. Kentucky only a 9.5-point favorite, but I have Kentucky winning by 21 anyway. I think Kentucky is much improved. Florida plays their first game against Eastern Michigan. Florida's going to roll on that one. I got Florida 41, Eastern Michigan 7. Arkansas plays a FCS. Arkansas 44, Nicholls State 6. And you got an Ole Miss Vanderbilt game, which I don't know if anybody looked as poor as Vanderbilt did this past week against Temple. I mean, I felt bad for them.
Let's not talk about Vandy. Let's just not talk about that.
It was bad. I felt really bad for the entire team. All of them, new coach there. I just felt really bad for them. And it's not going to get much better this week against Mississippi State. I mean, against Ole Miss. I like Ole Miss to pretty much whack them 42-7. I mean, 42-10. I think it's going to be a long, long year for Vanderbilt. If anything, from that first game, 7 turnovers, and it was bad to watch, man. It was so bad that I had to turn it over to Washington State versus Rutgers. It was bad. You got some pretty interesting out of conference games out of the SEC this week. You got the biggest one is Oregon and Michigan State. Michigan State traveled to
that game. I'm telling you, this is the third test for Oregon. Can they finally beat a physical football team? It's not Stanford, but it's Michigan State. Mark D'Antonio does a great job of running the football, building off of that with play action, playing strong defense. Can Oregon finally beat a physical football team?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting test for both teams. If this game was in Lansing, man, I may have to pick Michigan State. I'm going to go with Oregon in this one. I like Oregon by 21. I think Oregon may roll in this game, man.
Oh!
I do. I've seen Oregon do it too many times to me, man. I've seen me pick the opposing team and Oregon just beat them into the ground. I think Michigan State can score some points, but they've got to get some turnovers from Oregon to be even close in this game. I like Oregon 41, Michigan State 20. I hope Michigan State can go do it, but I like Oregon in this game. I think it could be closer than that, but I'm going to go with what I've seen in the past, and I got Oregon by 21. You got Ohio State, Virginia Tech, who I think is a pretty interesting game right there. Virginia Tech can play them pretty tough defensively. And Ohio State's got to play better on the offensive line than they did against Navy. I still like Ohio State to win this game. I like it 28-14. I think Ohio State's going to win the game. I think they're going to bounce back and have a much better game than they did against Navy. And another out-of-conference game, this is really big. I think this could be the game of the week in all of football. I think USC at Stanford. I think it's going to be a great game. USC kind of flew under the radar. They laid the wood to Fresno State in the first game. Stanford played I forgot who they played first week. It was an FCS team, but they played them. I think it may have been Cal State Fullerton. I don't know who they played, but it was somebody bad. This is going to be a really, really close game, I think. I'm picking the upset. I'm picking USC to win this game on the road at Stanford. I like USC by 3 points in this game, 27-24 to upset Stanford on the road. And it could set a lot of things in motion for USC and Steve Sarkisian in his first year there. I like USC to pull the upset on the road. It's my upset special for the week. And other than that, I got my last game I'm going to pick on here is Notre Dame and Michigan. I think this is going to be a classic Notre Dame-Michigan game. They always seem to be pretty good games. The one a couple years ago was fantastic game. Usually I would pick Notre Dame at home in this game, but I'm going to go with Michigan. I think Michigan in another upset, a little slider of an upset. I like Michigan 31-27 in this game to beat Notre Dame. And those are my picks for the week. What do you think about some of those, Steven?
Great decisions on those picks. Going back to the USC Stanford one, the 27-24 one, that was very very complimentary to a couple of years ago when Stanford had Jim Harbaugh, USC had Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll was still there, and Stanford pulled the upset over USC.
They did.
27-24. I like what Steve Sarkisian can do with this team. Coming back home, Cody Kessler continuing to grow as a quarterback. Yes, you're facing David Shaw, a guy that's just like Michigan State's Mark D'Antonio. David Shaw, strong-minded defensive coach, run the football, play action with Kevin Hogan. That's going to be a fun game. The Irish in Michigan, oh, baby, close. Everett Golson, I'm starting to like this kid from Notre Dame. Very close game. But the Wolverines, baby, Brady Hoke, I feel like Devin Gardner is finally starting to get it in the fact that I can't just run. I have to throw the football. Devin Funches, a talented receiver. I like Michigan in this game. Close. I like Michigan 28-24. I'm going to go with the Wolverines 28-24. I saw the Tennessee, Utah State game. Butch Jones has his team going forward. Justin Worley finally with some confidence on him. So I liked how that game went. Of course, with Arkansas, Brett Bielema, you're playing against Nicholls State. Just a game to finally get something going with Brandon Allen. I feel like if Brandon Allen is not the guy, it's time to go with either Rafe Peavy, the talented freshman, or Austin Allen, Brandon Allen's brother, because it just feels like Brandon Allen still hasn't gotten the grip on the game. I know he was injured last season with the shoulder, but in the SEC, you got to move the football as a quarterback. The running backs can only do so much. The receivers can only do so much. Defense only does so much. The quarterback has to move the football. When you look at Alabama and Florida Atlantic, you're giving Florida Atlantic 7. I'm pitching a shutout. I think Alabama gives up nothing. I think the final score in this one, 49-0 Alabama. I think the Crimson Tide's defense, I think Kirby Smart is very ticked about the comments he got after the 23 points that West Virginia scored. I think he's going to have a fire under him this week. Again, this defense to pitch a shutout, follow your assignment, play the football, and just wreak havoc. I think that our Alabama defense gets a shutout. And like you mentioned on the offensive side of the football, I think the line gets even better. I feel like Leon Brown has a good game. The line as a whole has a good game. You'll see a lot of Jacob Coker in the second half. The running backs, you're going to see a lot of new faces. A little bit of Tyron Jones, Naughty Tenpenny in the mix in there. I feel like Kenyon Drake will have a good football game. But your picks, Scott, enjoyed them all. If the fans want to see my picks, they can go on the story that you're going to put up, be a touchdown Alabama magazine this week. They can peruse over my picks as well. But this is week 2 of college football that we're about to enter, and what a joy that we're about to see in these teams in week 2 of how much can they grow, how much can they put more in place, and how much will the coaching staff be willing to help these players grow and mature, not just as players, but as men on and off of the football field. Well, that is all the time we have today on the S&S Show, brought to you by Touchdown Alabama Magazine, your leader in football coverage. We are greatly sponsored by Bama Sports Radio. Bama Sports Radio, you can get them on iTunes. There's an app on your iPhone, Android phone. Bama Sports Radio providing the best commentary for Alabama football, basketball, baseball, whatever venue you enjoy. From an Alabama perspective, Bama Sports Radio has you covered. Our own Scott Hodnett has the app, and he's enjoying it.
Oh, yeah, I love the app. I listened to it earlier today, actually.
He listened to it earlier today. He is already patronizing the business. You can catch Bama Sports Radio anywhere. Take it with you on the road, on the go. And here, also with us here for Touchdown Alabama Magazine, the S&S Show, we would love for you to catch us every Wednesday at 5 p.m. live here on Google Hangouts. We don't just talk about Alabama football. We break down the SEC and some national games as a whole. If you can't catch us here on the site through Google Hangouts and interact with us, podcast is the next best thing. We send out a podcast every Thursday on www.touchdownalabama.net, whether you're working out, whether you're in class, whether you're going through the McDonald's drive-thru, whether you're at home about to cook up those hot dogs, potatoes, and bacon, or if you're at work punching that clock, you can always catch the S&S show via podcast. But as I mentioned, this is all the time we have on today. For Scott Hodnett, I'll be yours truly, Stephen M. Smith. Enjoy the game. Until next time, so long, everybody.